It's a little after 5 o'clock Eastern time. It's week 16 of the 2022 NFL season. Happy holidays, everyone, and welcome to the FTN Bets NFL betting show. I'm your host, Tom Hannifan. I'm joined, of course, by Taylor Mathis and Chris Meaney, who is hunkering down in Canada for inclement weather. God bless him. Right now, we want to show you the matchups that are coming up this weekend on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the NFL. For those of you watching us live, get involved in the chat and let us know what you'd like us to weigh in on. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications on YouTube, comment, and like us as well. Still to come, it's our 3 and out best bets segment at the conclusion of the show. Taylor and Chris will give their bronze, silver, and gold picks for this weekend. We recommend you keep an eye on our official bet tracker as always, FTN alerts, and of course, FTNBets.com. You can try a free 3-day trial of FTN Daily at FTNDaily.com right now. Also, you can get $100 off NFL All Access on FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets now with the promo code XMAS10, XMAS10, now at FTNFantasy.com/pricing. So a lot of good deals this holiday season. And we are very, very excited to kind of talk NFL football here with Christmas weekend upon us, and everything got started last night with Thursday Night Football. Chris, the Jaguars taking care of business against the New York Jets, winning by a score of 19-3. Really critical win for the Jaguars because all of a sudden they are in playoff contention, and to beat the Jets was really important in regards to the seeding within the AFC. And on top of that, what is going on with the Jets at quarterback? They can't seem to find anybody to put out there.
No, they can't. It's tough go for the Jets. I think, the writing is on the wall for Zach Wilson last night. To me, it feels like it. Robert Saleh can say whatever he wants. Like, they're not done with Zach Wilson. We'll see Zach Wilson again. I don't know. In a must-win game with a lot on the line, they went to their fourth-string quarterback last night, who they didn't even trust to throw the football, but he moved the ball better than Zach Wilson moved the ball. To me, it's more about the Jags. Like, it's such a fun team. They're hitting their stride at the right time. It's all about coaching in the NFL. And last year with Urban Meyer, they couldn't get anything done. It's just like there was just so many question marks. This year with Doug Peterson, who has won a Super Bowl in the league a couple of years ago, has done great things. He's been around great quarterbacks as a backup himself in the league. He's been around great coaches as well. Andy Reid comes to mind. And, he made wonders out of Carson Wentz and Nick Foles that year. And this Jags team's playing really good. Trevor Lawrence looks like the guy that was taken first overall. And then the Jets wish that they had that first overall pick, that they didn't have to take Wilson and they were able to take a guy like Trevor Lawrence. So they're playing really good football. I think they got the Texans next week and then the Titans to wrap it up. If they win out, they're in the playoffs. And that's just one of the few amazing stories and Cinderella teams that have made a run here at this time. So it's more about the Jags for me last night than the Jets.
Oh, I completely agree. And Taylor, it's an absolute logjam of teams in the AFC with records of 8-6 all the way down to 6-8. I think it's about 6 or 7 teams that all seem to be quote unquote in the hunt or basically in contention for a wild card spot. Do you think the Jags can ultimately pull it off?
I do. I think everything that Chris said, they're surging at the right time at the end of the season. And Trevor Lawrence looks like that first round draft pick. It's amazing what Doug Peterson's done with him. Travis Etienne every single week seems to be getting things done on the ground for the Jags. They just look really good. And I wish I would have went with my gut. At the beginning of the week, I was all about Trevor Lawrence over his passing prop because I was like, he's passed for more than 300 yards in 3 out of his last 4 games. But no, I just saw the number kept lowering. It got slashed. It opened at 229 and it ended up yesterday at 214.5. So I was like, okay, it's got to be the under with the weather and everything like that. We got to go with the under. I am very mad at myself that I did not go with my gut instinct and what I originally looked at because I ended up taking the under and I was wrong. So Trevor Lawrence looks great. The Jags look great. And I do think of any Cinderella team, I would say the Jags and the Lions are 2 teams that I'm really looking at to make a postseason push.
Amazing. I agree with you. And yeah, and isn't that always the case when you have your gut feeling and then you think it back and forth 100 times, whether it's fantasy or betting? I mean, that's a pain. Speaking of the AFC race, I do want to keep things there in regards to a game that's coming up this Saturday. It's the Cincinnati Bengals at the New England Patriots. Last I looked, the Bengals were getting -3 on the road. This is Saturday afternoon. I'm really excited about this full weekend slate of football over the holiday. We're getting a lot of games on Saturday, a few on Sunday. and of course Monday Night Football. We're going to get to those, but Cincinnati 10-4, New England 7-7. New England obviously lost. I don't even know if heartbreaker is a way to put it, Taylor. That game against the Raiders,
Luke.
I feel terrible for Jacoby Myers. Obviously, he made a boneheaded play and a big time mistake, but all of a sudden, New England, and I was just talking about this moments ago with the Jags and the Jets, they're right in that logjam of teams that are in contention. But I don't know if there's a ton of hope for New England, and especially the way Cincinnati has played. They've won 6 straight games, and they've already clinched a playoff berth. What's your gut feeling looking at this game?
Well, I think Cincinnati's won 6 straight. They're extremely dialed in right now. They're the hottest team in the NFL in my eyes. After winning that many in a row, New England's red zone offense is the worst in the league. They just aren't scoring. QB Mac Jones had a horrible performance in Vegas against the Raiders. I think Cincinnati wins this one outright. I'm very surprised that the number is not bigger than 3 points right now. I know historically Joe Burrow hasn't played as well against New England, so maybe that's why they're expecting it to still be a very competitive matchup here in the AFC and in the division. But I think Cincinnati's rolling right now. I don't really see much stopping them. And if anything, I don't think it'll be the New England Patriots.
In regards to the way the Patriots on defense are built, Chris, they have a tendency to take away your best option. Now, last week, they really limited Raiders wide receiver Devonte Adams. Do you see them doing the same thing against Jamar Chase, who's not exactly looked exactly like the Jamar Chase that we've gotten accustomed to? He's had 4 and 5 catches last 2 games, respectively.
Yeah, you got to wonder how healthy he is. I know he was placed on IR and he missed a little bit of time. And, now he's back, and this will be, I think, game number 3 for him. Bill Belichick does have a history of doing what you just talked about, taking away the opposing team's best player, and he is going to be the best player on the football field. So maybe look for a guy like T. Higgins, who a couple weeks ago frustrated everybody if they were in on his prop or, played him in fantasy because he played 1 snap and then he didn't touch the field again after that. But it was a coach's decision. He practiced in full last week. He's practicing in full this week. I would expect him to go. But I agree with Taylor. I mean, Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati Bengals offense is absolutely legit. And I think a lot of people realize that. But even heading into the season, there were still some excuses with this squad. It's like, they made the Super Bowl. They went on a run, but they had an easy schedule. And this year they have a really tough schedule. And they're going to have a hard time coping with that schedule. And sure, they've had some really tough matchups, but they've won those tough matchups. And again, Patrick Mahomes a couple weeks ago went into Cincinnati and they took care of Mahomes and company, and Burrow is 3-0 against Mahomes in his career. So I like Cincy. I agree with Taylor. I feel like 3, it's interesting. We're getting 3. It was 3.5 earlier. Now we're getting 3. Just go into New England, and which is a tough place to play for sure. The Pats defense is really good. They can get pressure. They're probably going to get a couple sacks on Burrow, but I would expect Cincinnati to win this football game. That was, I don't know what it was. You said what? Heartbreaking, maybe not heartbreak. Whatever happened last week.
Weird. I don't even know what to call that.
It almost seemed like it was rigged. I know it's not, but it almost seemed like, I can't really even explain it. But New England's done. This week, even if they find a way to win that game, they got Buffalo and Miami to wrap up their schedule. So it's a tough finish for them. And Cincinnati looks like they're going to win that division.
And on top of possibly winning the division, Taylor, Cincinnati is in the hunt to possibly get a home playoff game because they're right there with the Kansas City Chiefs, only 1 game behind them. And then the Buffalo Bills are at 11-4 and have overall clinched a playoff berth. But still, who gets home field advantage is absolutely in play. And considering the way that Cincinnati came back against Tampa Bay, I mean, they spotted Tom Brady a 17-3 lead at halftime. They still came back and easily won that game in the second half. Do you see Cincinnati locking up home field advantage either at 1 or 2?
I do, especially if I'm looking at putting the Chiefs and the Bengals head to head right now as they are playing. The Chiefs over their last 3 games have looked a little sloppy to me. They lost to the Bengals. Then they take care of business against the Broncos, but it wasn't a dominating, overwhelming win like I expected. And then they went to overtime with the Texans and they squeaked past with that win. So the Chiefs are not on that up and up like the Bengals are. So I like the Bengals here.
I'm very excited to see this game again. A lot of playoff implications, specifically for the Bengals at the top of the heap. And then, as we mentioned, New England just right in the thick of it, but things just don't seem to be trending very well for the New England Patriots. On Saturday, from the AFC to the NFC, we go. We absolutely have to talk about this one. On Christmas Eve, it's the Philadelphia Eagles visiting the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are getting -4.5 at home, and this is largely, Taylor, in the wake of the news that Jalen Hurts, starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, will not be playing in Dallas for this game because of suffering a sprained right shoulder, his throwing shoulder, in the victory against the Chicago Bears this past weekend. It is backup quarterback Gardner Minshew who's going to be getting the start against the Cowboys. I know we have our biases on this show. We've made it very, very clear. Taylor's a Cowboys fan. Chris and I are Eagles fans, but on paper, do you believe Dallas getting this big of a spread?
I had to throw my hat on.
Yes.
I knew that Chris was in there with the cold weather. I was like, I gotta throw my Cowboys hat on.
There you go. I appreciate doing it during the graphic. That was solid.
Yes. Yeah, that was
I
amazing.
grabbed it. I was like, here we go. Now's my time. All right. So we know that we've all had this date marked on our calendars here for a while. I was more excited about this prior to the Cowboys losing in overtime to the Jags last weekend. And now with Gardner Minshew starting over Jalen Hurts, it doesn't have as much appeal, but it's still a giant game in the NFC East and in the NFC right now in general. If I had to place a bet that I would just put everything on, it'd be for Dak Prescott to throw an interception right now. And I hate saying that as a Cowboys fan, but he's had 9 since week 10 right now, the most in the NFL. He's ruining games for us based on his picks. I also think I would probably go Eagles +5.5. I think this game stays close regardless of the quarterback situation. And I'm being an unbiased fan here by saying all of that. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Eagles, all the drama surrounding Micah Parsons saying that, is it Jalen Hurts? Is it the team? I think we're going to find out for real. Is it really Jalen Hurts or is it the rest of the Eagles roster? We'll be able to see. Is Dak Prescott going to be able to be clutch for us in key moments when games like this are close and a lot is on the line? I don't know. Right now, with what I'm seeing out of Dak Prescott, I would vote no. But I do think this one will stay close. I like the Eagles +5.5, and I like Dak to throw an interception too.
And for the record, according to FTNBets.com, over under a 0.5 for interceptions thrown for Dak Prescott. That's going for anywhere between -134 and -135. So something to consider there. And if you're feeling really optimistic as a Cowboys fan, the under looks good as well. In regards to this game, Chris, we've heard all the talk of Micah Parsons as Taylor was just alluding to, and that this team is a team and it's not all Jalen Hurts. As an Eagles fan, I actually agree with that in a good way, and that this is not necessarily Jalen Hurts being Superman every single week. And it's what makes this team, I think, so difficult to bet at times, because you look at the victory against the Tennessee Titans, 380 yards passing, and then the week prior, they get a victory with 63 yards rushing on the ground. So you never really know which way the Eagles are going to pull out a win, but they do find a way to win. So now with it being Minshew in there, where do you put your money in this game?
Well, I think, everything that you just laid out and what Taylor talked about, when I saw this spread jump to 7, I immediately jumped on the Eagles. +7? Are you kidding me? Like, this is all we've heard all year. Nobody's given Jalen Hurts any credit. He's like, yeah, like you said, he's a running quarterback, and then he decides to throw the football over his secondary. It's like, okay, wow, he can throw the football, but it's really just A.J. Brown and Devonte Smith. So there's been all kinds of excuses for Jalen Hurts, and I just think this is a well-round football team. And I think Parsons was right with his comments. Fair to say, is it Jalen Hurts or is it just the Eagles? And that's the headline. But if you listen to him talk to Von Miller, right, he did give a lot of credit to Jalen Hurts. He did say that he thought he should be the MVP, but he also gave credit to the squad as well. I mean, take Pro Bowl selections with a grain of salt, but the Eagles had a league high 8 of them and 11 reserves. 5 of their 11 starters are on offense, including all 5 of their offensive linemen, either a starter or a reserve. And that's why I went to Philly +7, because I don't feel like just removing Jalen Hurts and putting in Gardner Minshew is that big of a difference. It's a divisional matchup. Well, there's a lot on the line still for Philadelphia as well. You don't think that they're going to want to go in there and beat up on the Cowboys and clinch the division in Dallas? And there's still that glimmer of hope that Dallas can win out, and maybe Jalen Hurts isn't ready to go for the next couple weeks and the division is up for grabs for them. But I think it's a very important game for Dallas because of what Taylor mentioned with Dak Prescott. The defense has got some holes and some question marks in their secondary lately. The games that they have blown over the past couple weeks against Green Bay and then last week against Jacksonville, the offense did enough, but he had turnovers costly turnovers at bad times of the game in his own territory. So I think it's very important for Dallas to kind of take care of business. But I believe that the Eagles, on the strength of their secondary, the offensive line, I think they're going to lean on the run. And I don't think Gardner Minshew is that bad of a quarterback. We haven't seen him in quite some time. He's made 1-2 starts over the past couple of years inside this offense. But this should be a really entertaining game despite no Jalen Hurts. Like, we don't get that drama. I also don't believe in Chris Sims when he says that the Eagles would be 12-1 if they had Gardner Minshew. We're about to find out a lot of questions despite Jalen not being there. So we'll see. It should be a fun game, but I'm on the points. I'm taking Philly with the points. And, if you jumped on the 7, I mean, good on you, because I do believe it will be within a touchdown.
Why listen to Chris Sims? I mean, seriously.
He also said Zach Wilson was his favorite quarterback. I think he doubled down on that.
I liked Zach Wilson when he was coming out of BYU, but I guess I was wrong on that too. Kai Guy here in the chat asking basically, what are the chances the Eagles are, quote, passing on this game to save for the playoffs? I understand in regards to an injury standpoint, think about Jalen Hurts. Maybe you make sure Jalen Hurts is good for the playoffs, but to all the reasons that Chris just laid out and Taylor, is there's too much at stake at the top of the NFC in regards to the Eagles possibly locking up home field advantage. When you look at the top of the NFC, it would absolutely behoove the Eagles to lock up home field advantage in the number 1 overall seed, because you have dome team in the Minnesota Vikings, Northern California team in the San Francisco 49ers, and dome team in the Dallas Cowboys. You want those teams to come to Philadelphia in January. So that's an important game. I don't see the Eagles just benching people.
Philadelphia's fan base, we saw it in the World Series with the Phillies too. I mean, you Philadelphia fans show up for everything. So I feel like being in an environment like it would be in Philly for a playoff game with the Eagles would be something that would play out in their favor extremely well too.
Completely agree. So I expect them to be careful with Hurts, but I don't necessarily expect wholesale replacements in terms of backups and putting starters on the bench. So I expect this to be competitive.
You win this game, and then you can do that. Then you can rest whoever the heck you want over the next couple of weeks. I mean, if they win this game, we're not going to see Jalen Hurts until January 21st, which would be the second round of the playoffs. So then you have all the rest that you want to have with Jalen and some of the other starters.
Absolutely. So that is Saturday on Christmas Eve. That's tomorrow in the afternoon. The nightcap on Christmas Eve, since a lot of eyes will be on this, it's Saturday Night Football. It's the Raiders at the Steelers. Not exactly the two greatest records. The Raiders, we were just talking about it, their victory against New England, which was improbable. They're currently at 6-8. Meanwhile, the Steelers also sitting at 6-8. The Steelers are getting -2.5 at home. Chris, this has emotional value for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mean Joe Green and the late Franco Harris, both their numbers are going to be retired tomorrow night in Pittsburgh. Today actually marks the 50-year anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. That iconic moment is going to be honored tomorrow evening. You talk about the X's and O's on the field, but this is a fan base, and this is also a team and an organization that values their past, values their legends. Do you expect Pittsburgh to be up for this game against a Raiders team that is kind of riding high off of a odd emotional victory against the Patriots last week?
Yeah, Chandler Jones walk-off defensive touchdown. I don't even know what to call it. Yeah, I would say definitely. I mean, there's a lot of history with this organization. They've been around for quite some time. I saw some headlines that maybe this is going to be the coldest game ever in Pittsburgh's history at home. There's a lot of craziness happening, and with the weather, it's something you got to keep an eye on with everything. But it should be a fun game, even though these two teams are it kind of seems like they're out of it, both of them.
Yeah.
There's a slight chance the Raiders, but it's very, very, very slight. And they've had a couple collapses themselves over the past couple weeks. But yeah, it should be, an interesting game. Outdoors, pretty cold. I was looking at just from an NFL prop standpoint, I saw a catch prop for Devonte Adams at 4.5 and 67.5 yards. I've never seen anything that low next to his name. That just goes to show of what the weather could be like there. But yeah, the Steelers are playing really good defensively, especially, since Watt has been in their lineup as well. That's kind of been their bread and butter over the past couple of years is their defense and surrounding Watt. So yeah, it should be a really good game, even though I don't expect a whole lot from either of these two teams moving forward.
And Taylor, in regards to what Chris was talking about with Devonte Adams, he's been held to 7 catches total the last 2 weeks, 99 total receiving yards and no touchdowns. So it feels like one of those bounce back games potentially for number 17, and Pittsburgh is the 5th worst defense against wide receivers this season. So there is an anytime touchdown prop for Adams going for anywhere from plus 102 to plus 170 on FTNBets.com. Do you like Adams to rebound in this game, or do you see it being Waller, Renfro, or Jacobs?
I think I would lean more towards Jacobs just because the weather is such a question mark right now surrounding so many of these games. If it's really going to be that cold, is there going to be snow, or what's the field going to be like? I just think there's a lot of question marks surrounding it. I feel safer most of the time when the weather plays a big factor into games, leaning more towards the ground game rather than going through the air. I saw that bite me, though, yesterday when I took Trevor Lawrence under on the passing, so maybe don't listen to me on that. But I would lean more on the ground game. I think Josh Jacobs is having the most incredible season of his career, so why not go with that? They're riding high off of the crazy win they had last weekend. I know Chris is saying this is going to be a good game for me. This is going to be a game I don't know how much attention I will pay to it. I'm like, well, do I really necessarily know if I think there's a lot at stake here? I'm just kind of like, I guess it'll be a fun game, especially if you're a fan of either of those two teams or part of those fan bases. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. For somebody like me, I'm like, I'll probably be watching Red Zone, so I'll maybe see some of the scoring plays. That's about it.
And there might not be a lot of them. There's
that could be minimal too.
When I said about how it would be a good game, Taylor, there was a voice in the back of my head just like, did you really just say that?
Is it really gonna? I know when you're saying that, I was like, I think I disagree with him because I don't know if it's gonna be a good game.
Yeah, we probably will see a lot of both running backs. Again, I was looking at some quarterback passing props. I think I see 5 quarterbacks with a passing prop of at least 250. And Taylor, I don't think you should be so hard on yourself. I think you were unlucky, if you took the under on Trevor Lawrence, because his passing attempt prop was like 33. Didn't even come close to that. And there was a lot of screen passes that just kind of went long, with Evan Ingram. But for the most part, this is across the board. This is a weird week. I mean, a lot of people are dealing with crazy weather. I think, as I mentioned, 5 quarterbacks at 250. It's like Rodgers right at 250, Burrow, of course, Mahomes, and the other 2 are escaping me. Maybe Kirk Cousins, of course, inside the dome. But there's not a lot of quarterbacks with large passing props. So it probably will be a lot of Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris in that game, which, it isn't super exciting.
Yeah, the over under, I think I saw at 38.5. So it could be low scoring. Moving from Saturday night to Sunday night football. This will be on Christmas Day. It's the Buccaneers on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. The Bucs, last I saw, were getting -7.5 for this game. I believe that stands. Tampa Bay is currently 6-8. Arizona's 4-10. This is a beleaguered Cardinals team. So much so that former Penn State quarterback Trace McSorley is going to be getting the first start of his NFL career for the Arizona Cardinals as they host Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. We talked about it a little bit earlier on there, Taylor, the way that the Bengals came back and beat Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. It was 17-3 lead for the Buccaneers over the Bengals at half, and then ultimately Joe Burrow leads them back there in the second half. Now you've got potentially an angry Tom Brady and company heading to Arizona, which I can't imagine Cliff Kingsbury being a part of this team next year. Kyler Murray seems like a head case. They're down to their 3rd string quarterback. Granted, I love me some Trace McSorley. He's the truth. But looking at this matchup, I feel like this is Bucs all the way. Do you think they cover that spread? That's my question.
I do. I'm very confident in laying the 7.5 points with the Bucs. Living out here in Arizona, I hear it on a daily basis, people talking about the Cardinals, and everybody will come for the Cardinals front office's heads if Cliff Kingsbury is not out of the picture next year. So I would be very shocked if he stays with the Cardinals. They're just so injury plagued this season as well. Trace McSorley, I was like, I barely heard of him before this until this week. So we'll see what he's able to do. Although we have seen Tom Brady lose to a 3rd string quarterback this year already in Brock Purdy. So could it happen again? I mean, there's never say never, I guess, this season for Tom Brady and the Bucs. They had an unfortunate loss, losing after they started really strong against Cincinnati last week and let go of that lead that they had. Coming into Arizona, hey, they're going to get a nice little, I guess they're in Florida though, so it's probably nice weather there too. But I was going to say they can maybe get a nice little tan or something here. The weather's nice. They should have a pretty easy go of it against the Cardinals. I think this is a great bounce back spot for the Bucs, and they might as well at this point. They pretty much have the NFC South at this point in their clutches. There's not much else that can really happen, regardless if they win or lose. So I think that this is a spot for the Bucs to win.
Yeah, the Bucs right now are sitting at 6-8, as we were just talking about. They should win the NFC South unless something miraculous happens here with the Panthers, Saints, and Falcons, who are all at 5-9. So unless the Buccaneers are about to have a catastrophic collapse here in the last few games of the season, and all of a sudden somebody bows up, I really don't expect that to happen. Chris, is there anybody on the Arizona Cardinals who sticks out to you? Trace McSorley, I'm biased as a Penn State guy. I think the world of him, especially for those who don't know, he was the third string guy in Baltimore behind Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley because he's a similar type of athlete and he played within that system. I think there's a similar skill set to Kyler Murray, definitely not the same type of athlete, but maybe this is a situation where, hey, he can come in and surprise a defensive coordinator who's not seen a lot of him. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I won't say anything too bad about your boy. But all I'll say is that he has completed 18 passes in his NFL career and 39 attempts. It's a 46% completion rate. He's thrown 3 picks. It's not a good spot for him. It's a tough spot for him. It's unfair. It's like you said, you got an angry Bucs team that, there's something with this team every single week. And it's this guy's good players on that squad that have just missed assignments, and it just seems to blow up in their face. But I would expect them to take care of business here on the road in a dome against a team that just seems checked out. You mentioned the coaching staff, right? And, Taylor's talking about the front office. This just can't wait for the season to be over. Like, this is done. Like come on. So I wouldn't take any props. I don't think anything really from the Arizona side of things. To be honest, I mean, I'm looking at McSorley is passing yard props at 187. I mean, I don't feel too good about that.
I don't either.
His minus 200 for him to throw a pick. So Vegas is, expecting him to throw an interception in this game. On the other side, I think we could see something from Fournette and Rachaad White. Those guys haven't had great seasons, especially Fournette has been very underwhelming, but Arizona hasn't been able to stop the run over the past couple of weeks, especially last week. Latavius Murray he was in terms of like just yards per carry and yards after contact is one of the worst backs this season. And he had, I think, 130 rushing yards against their defense last week. So I could see a garbage time touchdown or receiving prop hit for Devonte Adams, but for the most part, I think this would be a Tampa win. And if they lose, then I have no answers for the Bucs. I don't know what the heck's going on with that team, but they should win.
Yeah, it's been very confusing. Obviously, Tom Brady especially has had a ton of off-the-field things to concern about, far bigger than football this year, so you can understand. But they've also been plenty banged up along the offensive line. They've just recently got a lot of defensive starters back from injury, so maybe they're rounding into form, but this should be a good win for them on the road at Arizona. So that's Sunday Night Football. Let's look at Monday Night Football on December 26th. It's the LA Chargers visiting the Indianapolis Colts. The Chargers are getting minus 4.5 on the road. The Chargers are 8-6, so they're right in the thick of the playoff hunt. Meanwhile, Indianapolis, I believe, is mathematically eliminated at 4-9-1. The Chargers are tied for 5th right now in the AFC with the Dolphins at 8-6. The Dolphins will host Green Bay on Christmas Day, so there's another game to keep an eye out for. And Chris, I know you're going to love this. The expectation is that former Super Bowl MVP of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Foles, is going to be starting for the Indianapolis Colts. On your bingo card of all the things that could happen for the Colts this year, did you ever see this one coming?
No, 'tis the season. Saint Nick back again. I like it. I don't know. Tough. It's been a really tough year in Indianapolis, and Jeff Saturday is now the head coach. Is zero head coaching experience, and he went from Sam Ellinger to Matt Ryan. I thought that was a good decision, and now Matt Ryan is on the bench. So this is it is very surprising. I think Foles is good enough to kind of keep this game close, but you got one team fighting for their playoff lives and another one that's just kind of, like you said, we're experimenting with a third string quarterback, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th quarterback they've had over the past 3 seasons in Indy. They haven't been able to figure out the position at all since Andrew Luck unfortunately retired. There's one guy I'm looking at. There's no prop on him. It's Zach Moss. It is a pretty good spot. I would expect, with Foles to kind of, hand it off. I mean, we could, throw the football if they get down in the game, but the Chargers have been so bad against the run over the past couple of weeks. And And Zach Moss had 24 carries for 81 yards last week. He dominated all the touches inside the red zone. If he gets there, he's plus 120 for a touchdown, which is not that appealing. But I would say his rushing yard prop checks in the mid 50s, and I think he could get there. But yeah, just another crazy storyline where another team is rolling out a third, fourth string quarterback.
Yeah, the Colts, it's not been a great year. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is out for the remainder of the season with injury, so they just don't have the weapons at this point. Speaking of weapons, Taylor, who on the Chargers do you like for this game?
Ooh, on the Chargers do I like for this game? Well, I've been going over the past couple of weeks on Justin Herbert's passing prop, and it has been profitable every single week over the last few. So I would lean into looking in the pass game with Justin Herbert. Austin Eckler's been pretty good the rest of the later part of this season. He didn't start out strong, but if they go with the ground game plan here against the Indianapolis Colts, I would take him over on his rushing props as well. This is another game where I'm just like, some of these primetime games, I'm like, I think after this season, whoever decides these schedules really needs to start looking at who these quote unquote top teams they thought were going to be. I think things have really shifted around this season, especially new quarterbacks coming in, old quarterbacks phasing out. A lot of teams that we assumed to be good did not turn out as good as they expected. For example, the Indianapolis Colts, a lot of people were expecting at the beginning of the year to be a lot better than they have been. So I think that getting a better schedule will help a lot of these primetime games, because some of these I'm just like, I wish that there were different games in their place or they got flexed out.
Well, that's just it. Like Tom, when they made the schedule for Christmas Day, they probably thought, "Oh, Broncos and Rams?
Right.
Are you kidding me?
That's going to be great."
Wilson and Matthew Stafford.
I know,
man, this is going to be fantastic. And then it's Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson, who, we saw a backup quarterback in Denver last week, and I think they had their second best showing as an offense. So it's been a very weird year.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, how many Broncos games did we get to start the first, 6 or 8 weeks of the season in prime time because of the narrative with Russell Wilson coming from Seattle and all his new weapons that he was supposedly going to have and his star power, which you understand. But still, I completely agree with you, Taylor. There's got to be some sort of adjustment in regards to flexing some of these games if possible. Yes. And I'm excited about, because I have YouTube TV, so the NFL Sunday Ticket is going to be coming to YouTube TV very soon. So that's a nice $2 billion deal per season.
Yep.
Oh, man. All right. So that's Monday Night Football. And of course, we have to wind down this show with our patented segment. 3 and Out is our best bets segment. We've been talking a lot about quarterbacks, the stars that we've anticipated, and also the backups that have kind of rotated in. But one pleasant surprise this season has been the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. And that brings me to the bronze pick for Taylor. What do you got?
Bronze pick, Seahawks, Chiefs, Kansas City needs a win to stay in contention for that first round playoff bye that we talked about. And Seattle's at 500. They need a win if they even want to stay right now in that postseason conversation. Since the start of the season, Seahawks quarterback Geno Smith has outperformed what everyone expected out of him heading into this year. This pass offense is top 10 in passing yards per game. I'm taking Smith over 1.5 passing touchdowns in plus money this week. Smith has thrown 2 or more touchdowns in every game this season, except for 3 of them. Smith's completion rating is top 5, and he's thrown for 26 touchdowns all season. It's 4th best in the NFL. And when it comes to trips to the end zone, 65% of those from Seattle are through the air. Smith is a very accurate passer. We've seen it all year. He'll be without receiver Tyler Lockett, but that will just give DK Metcalf some more time to step in. Kansas City's pass defense isn't spectacular. They give up over 200 yards a game, and majority of their defense had the flu bug this week, so I think that also plays in the Seattle Seahawks' favor. So I'm going Smith over 1.5 passing touchdowns this week.
I was talking a little bit earlier about, your bingo card for 2022. If you had Geno Smith as a Pro Bowler in 2022 coming into this season, man, you must have made a lot of money on that bet. Seriously, it's unbelievable what Geno's done. Chris, your bronze pick has to do with another game that is very important in regards to playoff positioning. It's the New York Giants against the Minnesota Vikings. Who do you like on the G-Men?
Yeah, this is a guy that I've talked a lot about this year, and I wanted to avoid him, but what we said earlier, there's a lot of just bad weather games, and we'll be looking at maybe some unders, which is unusual for me. I got no unders today, I tell you that, but I am looking at a wide receiver playing in a game that's in a dome and playing against a defense is not very good. Against the Minnesota Vikings, we've had so many question marks about this Vikings. We know their offense is great. They're the largest comeback in NFL history last week. We mentioned those Colts and they not being able to figure it out this season. They were able to put up 33 points against them, up 33-0. And then they've somehow found a way to lose that game last week. So the Giants head to Meaney, as you mentioned, a big game for both squads, probably more so for the New York Giants, but an opportunity maybe to toss the ball on a secondary that hasn't been good. So Darius Slayton over 50.5 receiving yards, 2 dud games in a row, but 2 really good defenses. The Eagles and Washington. I do believe Washington does have a good defense. They get pressure on the quarterback and it does make things tough for opposing quarterbacks. 58 plus receiving yards in 6 straight games before those 2 matchups against the Eagles and the Commanders. 15.6 yards per catch. He's not a big volume guy. They are going to lean on Saquon Barkley, but you do expect, Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings to be able to score some points. So Daniel Jones will have some passing attempts here, and he doesn't need a whole lot to get to this number. And just picking on the Vikings a little bit more, a league high 15.1 receptions to the wide receiver position, 205 receiving yards per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. That's number 2 in the NFL behind the Detroit Lions. So pretty good spot here for Darius Slayton. I take anything as high as 55.5. We have him for close to 60 in our projections, and I think this number could move closer to kickoff.
And for similar reasons that we talked about earlier with the Philadelphia Eagles, this is just as important a playoff game, playoff implications for the Giants as it is for the Vikings, who are currently sitting at number 2. They've clinched the division in the NFC North. However, they want to hold on to some semblance of home field advantage for as long as they can in the playoffs. And it is very, very tight there with the 49ers and the Cowboys nipping at their heels. And of course, the Eagles sitting atop the NFC. Speaking of the NFC North, that does bring me to the silver pick for Taylor in regards to the matchup between the Detroit Lions, who are visiting the Carolina Panthers this weekend. Who do you like on Detroit, Taylor?
The Lions are like the star at the top of my Christmas tree right now because I just feel like they are surging in the right direction, winning 6 of their last 7. And all the credit right now on their offense is mainly going to quarterback Jared Goff, who hasn't thrown an interception through 219 consecutive passes, which is crazy to me. Goff is just playing at an extremely high level, but I really like Detroit's running back, Jamal Williams. He's getting into the house more than any other Lion on that team. I'm taking Williams over 42.5 rushing. This is a bounce back week for him after he had his 2 worst showings through week 14 and week 15. Williams isn't a back that's going to get over 100 rushing yards. That's just not the type of back he is, but he does get the volume. He averages over 15 rushing attempts per game. And Williams should have an easier task this weekend against a Carolina rush D that is bottom 10 in stopping the run. Williams over 42.5 rushing for my silver pick. And I just love the Lions right now. I'm also taking the points with them as well, laying the -2.5.
In regards to silver picks, let's keep with running backs, and it's the game that all of us are going to be watching, especially the 3 of us here. It's the Eagles at the Cowboys on Christmas Eve. Which running back jumps out to you, Chris?
Well, all 3 actually should touch the ball quite a bit, but going back to the Philadelphia Eagles here and Gardner Minshew under center, and last year he had 2 starts, one against the Cowboys, which didn't mean anything for either team at the moment. Dallas crushed Philadelphia in that game, but the Eagles rested everyone. They were already locked into the playoff spot. They knew they were playing the Bucs. But the first matchup that Gardner Minshew played when Jalen Hurts missed time with an ankle injury, it was against a bad team in the Jets. They weren't as good defensively as they are this season, but they really leaned on Miles Sanders. He had 24 carries and 27 touches. Both marks were the second most that he had ever had in a game. And last week, he really didn't touch the ball. It was kind of confusing. Hurts had a couple turnovers and they were kind of, playing from behind. Sanders had his first fumble. So he should be fresh, but also I feel like they'll lean on him a little bit here. You're not going to have Hurts there with a couple designed runs. Gardner Minshew is a little sneaky on the ground, but he's nowhere near Jalen Hurts. They're not going to have him, with a lot of RPOs. I think they're going to hand it off, lean on Miles Sanders. Talked earlier in the show about the offensive line. It's one of the best in football with, all 5 of their guys to the Pro Bowl or reserves. So I think it's a good spot. And plus Dallas, I don't know really what's going on with their defense lately. Running backs have had their way with the Cowboys. ETN, a $103 on 19 carries. Dameon Pierce, 78 on 22. Jonathan Taylor, pretty good running back. Not a great season, but he had 82 rushing yards against them. And then the Packers, a few weeks back, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon combined for over 200 rushing yards against them in that game. And Jones had the big game at 138. So Sanders is, 5.1 yards per carry for his career. He's a really good running back. But the offensive line is the key. They can open up a lot of holes for him. So, hopefully, if you take the over on this rushing prop at 63.5, then, you have a couple runs of maybe 12 or 13, and then you get there. We have them just like Taylor, when she mentioned Jamal Williams, we have Jamal Williams for well over the rushing yard prop at 42.5. We have Miles Sanders 10 more. We have him flirting with the mid 70s here against the Cowboys. So over 63.5.
Let's see if the Eagles do, in fact, commit to Miles Sanders. To your point, they really didn't get around to getting him the ball against Chicago until about the late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter. And just at that point, it seemed like too little too late to try and establish a ground game. So it's going to be a necessity against the Cowboys. Moving on to our gold picks. Taylor, yours is for the overall matchup between the Green Bay Packers, who are visiting the Miami Dolphins, with something to play for in regards to the playoffs.
It's crazy. I'm not giving a prop as my gold pick. I'm going Packers plus 3.5 against Miami. The Dolphins have slowed down their style of offense. QB Tua Tagovailoa's completion percentage over the last 3 games has hovered around 50% or less, and they've lost all 3 of those games straight. Prior to that, the Finns had won every game Tua had started, and he was completing around 70% of his passes through those games. We're seeing a lot of regression. But on the other hand, there have been some glimpses in the past few weeks of progress in Green Bay. Running back A.J. Dillon's status is up in the air. The Packers have been running the ball more efficiently, especially in the red zone. I feel like this is an opportunity for the Packers to keep it close with Miami. I'm going to go Green Bay plus 3.5. I feel like I wouldn't be stunned even if the Packers won outright either. Something is just scratching at me that the Packers are going to have a good weekend.
Chris, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot, actually. It's the first time that Rodgers, I know he doesn't have a ton of weapons, but it's the first time that, his trio of wide receivers are healthy, and Alan Lazard and Christian Watson, who's came on strong over the past couple of weeks. Romeo Doubs returned last week as well. So the nice trio there. A.J. Dillon is out of concussion protocol. Unfortunately for Green Bay fans, it looks like their team is starting to hit stride when it's a little bit too late. Again, just like the Raiders, I think they have like a 12% chance to make the playoffs. You need a lot to break their way, but that does favor leaning on Green Bay, is that they may feel like there's an opportunity for them to win a football game. And it's another game where you're not going to have to worry about weather. Just that sun will be beaten down on that visiting bench like it always is in Miami. But good 1-2 punch on the ground. You can run in Miami. It should be a fun game. I like the Packers as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. I think that's a very, very solid decision. Let's round out the gold picks here, Chris. It's a game that we were touching on moments ago in regards to Taylor's bronze pick, but it involves the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Seattle Seahawks. And it's always a question of which tailback necessarily for Kansas City is going to go off, but that's gotten pretty clear as of late.
Yeah, it has, Tom. And if you picked up Jerick McKinnon over the past couple of weeks and you played him last week in your fantasy football matchup, just as like a bit of a flyer, you had over 30 points, 2 touchdowns and a walk-off touchdown for the veteran Jerick McKinnon. He's kind of taking control of the backfield. Isaiah Pacheco is still getting in there and getting some touches, but he's really one-dimensional. He's not a guy that can catch the ball to the backfield. We know how pass-happy Kansas City is. McKinnon's getting his touches on the ground, and he's been really involved through the air. I have 2 props here that I like pretty much equally. They kind of play hand in hand as well, and they correlate. Over 21.5 receiving yards, and then over 3.5 catches is plus 135 at BetMGM. I also like his total yard prop at 50.5 and his rushing yard prop at 25.5. But let me just talk about these two just for a second, because over his last 2 games, he has 17 targets, 15 catches, and 182 yards. Last week, 8 grabs for 80. The week before, 7 catches for $112. 3 receiving touchdowns over his last 2 games, 4 total, 5 total touchdowns over his past 3 games. I mentioned he's also getting some play on the ground. 10 carries for 52 yards last week, 6 for 22 the week before, and 8 for 51 3 weeks before that. Seattle has been awful against running backs. 121 rushing yards allowed per game to the position, the 4th most. 5.7 catches per game, the 5th most to backs, and 47.9 receiving yards to running backs, the 4th most. We saw a couple Raiders backs, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, rack up over 100 receiving yards. Josh Jacobs had over 70. Amir Abdullah chipped in as well. Part of the numbers are skewed. I understand those things. And, Kansas City playing from behind a couple of times, which has been shocking, and they're large favorites here. But I feel like he's going to do enough in the passing game and on the ground just to kind of hammer home some of the projections and how I use these tools to kind of help with some of my props. I reference them a lot, but his rushing yard prop is 34. We have him for 4.2 catches and 39.4 receiving yards. So his receiving yard prop, like projection alone, is almost at his total prop for the day at 50.5. So I think he's going to do what he's been doing lately through the air and get some run on the ground as well. So I'm taking the over on all of it. Give me the total, give me the catches, give me the receiving yards, give me the rushing yards. But my favorite one would be the receiving yards, and then the catches at plus money.
And it's interesting because Isaiah Pacheco for a while seemed like he was emerging as being the guy and has really been reserved more to first, second, sometimes third down predominantly. And Jerick McKinnon is just getting more and more involved and is quickly becoming the number 2 target after Travis Kelce. So interesting times right now. Everybody's in the playoff hunt. And of course, it's the holiday weekend. So there's going to be a lot of things that play out this weekend that might be just a little funny. And that's kind of just the way this NFL season has gone. So Taylor, I do have to ask, how is Christmas in Phoenix?
Christmas in Phoenix is a little chillier than it is normally here.
Like 70 degrees.
It's a little bit harder to get in the Christmas spirit when you live somewhere that's warm majority of the time, because you just don't feel like the wanting to get cozy and being by the fire and the snow. So I'm like, I look outside right now and the sun is shining and I could go for a run or do whatever. I don't even need a coat. So it's a little bit different. It's harder to get into the spirit, but I love where I live, so I have no complaints.
Beautiful. And meanwhile, Chris is probably going to be digging himself out of a snowstorm any minute now.
I am
there you go.
The spiced rum and eggnog.
There you go.
You're doing it right. The moose mug.
This weekend, the feet will be up, the hands will be behind the head. We'll be watching some football, but everybody stay safe. I mean, I know it's crazy. I mean, Taylor's living the dream over there, but
I am.
There's a lot of bad weather across the world right now.
Yeah, everybody be careful. Everybody be safe. For those that celebrate Christmas, a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. This show will be back leading into New Year's weekend on Friday, December 30th. So be sure to tune in. For Taylor Mathis and Chris Meaney, I'm Tom Hannifan. And thank you so much for tuning in to the FTN Bets NFL Betting Show.